in terms of the diversity of the city. We really do reflect that in our school field trips. If you take those into account, if you take in our education programs in general with community centers, you know, if you just took all of the audiences that way, we look really representative. But when you look at just our general visitor who comes in their spare time as a cultural consumer, this is what our visitor looks like. Our typical visitor, according to our own internal evaluation work, they have at least a college degree. They're fairly affluent at 116K a year on average, which in New York, everyone's like, that's middle class. But you know what? It's doing pretty well in most places. And they're predominantly white, 61% white. And that is consistent with other cultural organizations. The most, I guess, formal survey that was done was in 2008, which was the National Endowment for the Arts, public participation in the arts, but it is really consistent with that. So we know it is still an issue. Who's coming to our institutions, right? So in contrast, NYCHA, with whom we have done a lot of, again, community programming, you know, this is their general population. 44% do not even have a high school diploma. The average income is 25 to 26K, and only 4.8% of whom identify themselves as white. And as the NYCHA system reports, you know, providing homes for 400,000 New Yorkers, that is a big chunk of our city that we are not serving on a regular basis. So this is why we really wanted to pursue this study, to find out why aren't they coming? You know, is it cost? You know, we are expensive, but we're also part of the Museums for All initiative, which means anybody who's got an EBT card, electronic benefits card, and 3 guests can come for free. We also have a lot of free entry times and days. Many of the art museums that we know of, you know, are pay what you want, right? Pay what you will, and people still aren't going. So the AAM Center for the Future of Museums had identified other possible barriers, the lack of information and confidence about the museum or what to expect on a visit. But then a big one is a deep-rooted feeling of not belonging, of not being welcome, that this is not for me. So why did we want to get involved in this, and why should museums or cultural institutions or any place of public learning and informal learning care? Well, like I said, in New York, it's 400,000 potential visitors. You know, these are New Yorkers. And it's also, though, from a non-selfish perspective, our city Department of Cultural Affairs has done a lot to really look at this. And they had a study done by the University of Pennsylvania that cultural resources are significantly linked to better health and schooling and security. You know, and so New York City's museums are really important. If providing access to them for families and residents in low-income communities is an important step towards social equity and all these other issues. So what we did, we sought some funding. And again, the Booth Ferris Foundation really was supportive in this. They were intrigued by this idea, especially if we could share it out with others. And I'll also share later a link to a little white paper that was put out by the museum that you can read, which has some of the things that we go over here. The first step was to get an advisory council that was made up of representatives from the city council, the NYCHA administrators, community liaisons from the NYCHA communities, who they put us in touch with. So, you know, it was the volunteer groups from within the communities. It was the tenants association leaders that came together, and we just talked about existing assets, affordable resources. They helped us inform the project design, the original project design before COVID, plan its implementation, and streamline audience engagement efforts, because we wanted to have focus groups and we wanted to have town hall meetings, and as well as doing some cultural programming. So we did manage, as we started, to have focus groups at the sites. We first went to them, though they also said it would be great to bring people to the museum who hadn't been there before. So we did both. We work with advisors to recruit and facilitate community-based focus groups, and open the dialogue with NYCHA residents about needs, wants, barriers, and potential solutions for engaging with museums and other cultural institutions. And just as a hint, if you're inviting people in the after hours or the weekends, feed them, if you're doing something at dinner, and then have something for their kids to do, because otherwise you become a cost, right? So we would, even if we brought, folks groups to the museum, while the parents were talking to us in a focus group, we'd be doing something with the kids. And that's just it's a simple thing, but sometimes I think people forget stuff like that. We provided a lot of free structured museum experiences, including weekend family programs for over 2,000 first time and repeat participants. Now, these were already, we didn't go out and create a whole new program. These were things we were already doing, family programs that we already were hosting, that we just, sometimes we sent a bus for. We were trying to tackle some of the issues that came up. One of the barriers, as I said at the beginning, I sit in an office on 13th Avenue. We're in the Hudson River. The nearest subway stop is at 8th Avenue. So to get to the entrance of the museum, you have to walk to 12th Avenue and then walk out on a pier. So it is, if you're talking about coming with a bunch of children, a stroller, a mother, an older person, anybody with mobility issues, like that is the first struggle. So with our funding, we did look at transportation in a couple of different ways. And one was just old fashioned, let's send a bus. And then we did a lot of evaluation. We had an outside evaluator, we had inside evaluation team, we had discussion facilitators, because sometimes it's easier for people to be honest when it's not you in the room. And then we did 5 focus groups, 3 of them at the NYCHA sites, 2 at the museum, and different kinds of observations and surveys and conversations along the way. We also sent out via good old-fashioned mail 10,000 informational brochures about free entry to the museum, all the ways you can get in for free, whether that's that EBT card or through Cool Culture, or you are a veteran, or you are a City University of New York student. And we sent it out, including a parking voucher. And that parking voucher, and I'll mention it again later with what we found, came from this, again, getting here, the challenge of getting here. One of the assumptions one makes, it's like people live in public housing, they probably don't have cars, but public housing is one of the few areas of New York, public housing communities that were built with parking lots. So people who live in them tend to have cars, and we do not have a parking lot here, but we have a neighbor parking lot by the Circle Line ferry, and we were able to arrange with them to send parking vouchers, because again, getting people here was one of the major challenges. And we created the information in English and Spanish and mailed them to the community residents of the 5 NYCHA partner communities and 4 additional communities. So we were trying to hit all 5 boroughs in several areas. Now, the goal of the project wasn't just about let's get people to come to Intrepid. We wanted to see why these audiences weren't using the cultural resources of New York City, and to help people become cultural consumers of everything in New York. So another thing that we had done was create and send out 200 resource maps specific to the area of the NYCHA community buildings. So it just told them what was around them. Because again, not knowing what was around them was perceived as being one of the problems, and people, said they didn't really know what was in the place. So this was one way we tried to alleviate that. Now, in terms of evaluation, one of the things in the original design we were going to find out is by seeing how many people did start following up with groups and seeing, did they go to their local library? Did they go to their local cultural center? Did they go to the local museum in their area? But COVID again put a kibosh on that. So I can't tell you how effective this all was, but this particular part of it, but hopefully. We created, in the original design, we were going to do exhibit panels that would go to all the community rooms in these 5 complexes, that would have information about Intrepid, that would have the information on how to get here and how to get here for free in different languages. And as a prototype to test it out, we created, those banners that pop up, very simple. And we sent them around. And this is one thing where, the design was necessarily iterative even from the beginning. And as I said, COVID sort of made it even more so. But this is one of the things at the beginning, they were kind of like, yeah, that's nice, but we don't really, have room for any of the stuff, even the pop-up one. So we ended up not ever going for the full exhibit panel thing and putting the funds into different areas, which this was one of them, which ended up being terrific because so many places were shut down. It was kind of a museum of the box. We ended up using that panel design and made it a poster. We sent circuit kits, a book on our airplane collection, their neighborhood guides, some general museum swag, and information in Spanish and English on how to get into the museum to each house. 200 groups to each site, to their community cultural or their community room, so they could just distribute it, which was great because they weren't yet open fully for programming, and this gave something for families and kids to do at home. All right, so things that we found. And I told you I was going to give you polls, and I didn't do it, but I'm going to give you polls once we're done with this. We're going a little out of order. We enlisted strategic partners that were already trusted in the community. This was a really important thing. Trust takes a lot of time, and even though this was a 2-year grant that ended up being extended, that's not enough. If you're going into a community, because we're talking about the difference between kind of outreach and building a relationship with the community, right? There are groups already working there. You have to find out who they are. So for example, with us, the Department of Youth and Community Development runs programming in a lot of the community centers embedded in the NYCHA complexes. So we started working with them. It's a city agency to help also spread word around this, around who we are, to help distribute those museum in a box kits, that kind of thing. There was also a group for one of the communities, the Community League of the Heights, which introduced the museum to groups of primarily Spanish-speaking families and helped facilitate that. So this is one simple thing you can do, is find out who's already there. Is it a meal delivery service going to seniors? Is it the local houses of religion? Like, who's already there and trusted, and partner with them to help you gain entry and know what's going on and what the needs are. Because also you want to have consistency in showing up in the community gatherings. You don't want to just show up with your programming or your need, or I've got this grant and now I want to give you this program. To know what the needs are and to build that trust, you need to be present. And they were suggesting, you should come to our tenant meetings, not to present necessarily, just to listen. Go to the PTA meetings in the local schools. One of the housing complexes is actually my neighbor, and I knew a lot of people there because our kids had been in the same elementary school. And the relationship just was very different because I was much more in tune, with the community, because it's my community, right? So that is something to think about. Showing up when you don't need anything, showing up when you're not trying to give them anything, just being part of their community. Letting go of assumptions was a really big thing. As I mentioned, the assumption about cars, that was kind of a silly example, but but it was a concrete one. We also had, the assumption that, we went into this with the assumption they're not cultural consumers. The members of these communities are not going anywhere. They are indeed going places, and they're actually using many of the same tools that other parents and other people are using to find things. There's a website, Mommy Poppins, right, to find out what's going on. So it's not, so that was something that was like, oh, it's not that they're not going places. They're just not coming to us, which is kind of sad. And part of it is what we talked about before, not knowing what was there. It came up, that they're using cool culture passes, they're using Mommy Poppins, but they didn't know what was at our museum. They're not sure what's at the Met, but they know what's at the zoo. The zoo is animals, and everybody likes animals. They know their whole family's going to have a good time. They, so it's, or the park, they know that, they know what's in there. They know that everyone's going to have a good time. And that was the thing, that there was just this lack of knowledge about what was in there, if they were going to have a good time. Value was, even if it was free, there was a sense of value because you're investing your time to go. And knowing that both, your grandmom and your 3-year-old are going to be happy on that family outing was really important to them. This leads into rethinking your communication strategies for your community needs. So we mailed things, as I said, because even though digital, is everywhere now, right? And everybody can access everything on their phone. And in New York, from pandemic, there really was an effort on the part of our school district. They did a pretty good job in New York City schools of getting devices into all the kids' hands. So families with kids had some devices. Most people now have some kind of cell phone or smartphone. But even still, we were told, as much as digital is a way to go, people still like to get something that could be held, hung up on the fridge as a reminder. So mailing, but then again, rather than just a cold mail, maybe give it to the God's Love We Deliver people who are taking meals to seniors. If you have a senior program, and they'll take it with them. This is where those partners can really help you again. The PTA, the parent coordinator in the public school system, if you have those in your area, can hand out things at PTA meetings, hand out flyers about things happening at your institution or organization. And that again comes into acknowledging diversity within the community to help you plan those communications. What languages? Just knowing, these are not monolithic communities. What languages are spoken there that you could maybe get your things or your programs translated into, or have someone on site that can welcome when people come to do a program that's translated or partially taught in different languages that were key to these communities. Is it a heavy young child community? Are there a lot of young families? That'll help you design programs that are be meaningful and useful. Is it a NYCHA complex or a community where it's maybe a naturally occurring retirement community? A NORC, right? Is that what they call them? So you want to be thinking about senior programming. So really get to know your community. And again, it's all kind of related to each other. None of this is revolutionary, but a lot of it is just getting yourself embedded in there. Rather than, again, thinking outreach to or programming for. These are your constituents, and getting to know who they are and what the relationship can be, and building that relationship. So having that stance of working with, not for. Okay. So again, none of these things are revolutionary, but they all are challenging in one major respect. It all takes time, and time is money. And I want to bring this up, and hopefully I would love it if there was some funders on here to hear this, but very often our grant funding is constructed on how many people you served, how many programs you ran, and there's not time and money built in to go to a PTA meeting and just listen, right? To show up at the Halloween fair and just kind of be there, and get to know people and hang out. So that means in terms of choice making, especially in these times of us tightening our belts, because COVID for a lot of institutions really hit gate, right? Our tickets. So we just don't have the ticket support, the in-kind kind of support we had inside. Are we going to continue to work with, in this kind of level, in this kind of intensity, with 5 NYCHA communities all over the city? Or are we going to focus on the one that's literally just down the block that we can walk to? Are we going to go and work with the senior home, or the retirement home that is in Brooklyn when we're in Manhattan? Or are we going to do the one that, again, we can send someone to and they can walk to or take an easy subway ride to? So there's some decisions around that if you're going to do this in a meaningful way, because you have to pay your staff to do these things, even if you're not running a program. And it's very hard to find funding for that kind of just being presentness in a group. And I think it's really worth looking at where you are and what you're trying to do in terms of diversification. So this is going to bring me back to the polls that I originally wanted to do at the beginning. I'm going to launch a poll, and then I'm going to take a look at some chat while this happens. And then we're going to do some breakout rooms and talk some more. But I'm going to launch this first one. Have I done that correctly? If you don't know, if you haven't done a study, like, what's your best guess of your general visitor? Okay. So people are feeling their visitors are somewhat diverse. So that's actually really good. We got 27% with not so much. We got a little bit, they're feeling it's reflecting the diversity of their area. And I put it in that language because I know my husband's from Avon, Illinois. It's near Galesburg. There isn't diversity. They used to have a historical, they used to have a local Avon history, I don't even know what they call it, history center or whatever, that was run by volunteers. And it's like now it's a village of 800 people, and they're all like some form of Scandinavian descent farmers. So it's like, it's as diverse as it is. And then you do sometimes have a consciously, less diverse audience because you're really trying to support a certain group of people and celebrate a certain culture, and it's your prime target for who your audience is. But it's nice to see that 60% of you feel like your audiences are somewhat diverse. So that's fantastic. And then the second poll is this one, just so for me to find out who's here. All right. So we've got about half of us here today are new to this area. So great, welcome. I'm glad you're doing this work. We got some folks with some more experience, and then tiny 4% over 5 years, and 11% over 10 years, and seasoned, not old. But it's great, and it's great to have people of all different experience levels coming in and talking about this idea of what is outreach and what is relationship building and how do we welcome folks into our museums or organizations. So back in the chat, just talking about that idea, thank you. Yeah, the zoo is self-evident, right? For the rest of us, we got some work to do. And, you know, how to have funding and how to get support, absolutely. So the next thing I would like to do, and please excuse me if the technology is not, if I have to think around with technology, because I am not the best at this thing. I just put a link in the chat. I'm going to stop the share for a moment. And the link is to what's called a Jamboard. I don't know if anybody has ever used one before. I'm going to share my screen again and kind of go over this. We're going to put you into just small groups. I'll try and do that without sending you into oblivion. And each one of you, you'll see you can scroll through. Do you see the Jamboard up here? Yeah. It's got 2 questions. And this is basically just some time to talk to each other in a small group, to process some of the things here, process some of the things you're going through. Again, I don't think anything that we found was rocket science, but it was just some really good practical things to do to help build your relationships in your communities or with welcoming different, as I said, non-traditional and more diverse audiences into your institution. A Jamboard, you can grab a Post-it, you can write whatever you want on your Post-it, save it, and then you know, move it and make it smaller or bigger, whatever, to answer the questions. So you can sort of collectively answer the questions, and you'll see at the top, you can scroll over and find your group. Okay. So if you're on the phone and you end up in a group and you're not someone who can type right now into the Jamboard, I think I put into the chat the links so you can get to your Jamboards. Your group can be kind to you, and somebody can type down what you have to say. And we're going to spend just around 7 minutes in our small groups to do this. And I think I do need my, I might need my, oh no, I got it, breakout rooms. So I'm just going to I'm going to just send you into oblivion. Does anybody have any questions before I do that about what this activity is or how to use the Jamboard? Good. All right, I'll see you in 7. And I can actually be seeing what you can add to the thing, which is very cool too. So, or maybe not, maybe I'll need a help. We create options, add a room. How do I send them there? VEX helper else, are they going?
How many breakout rooms do you want?
I think 5.
All right, I'll set it up real quick.
They're there, I can see them, but I don't know how to make people go there. But it doesn't matter.
Oh, open all rooms, that should do it.
Is that what does it? Do they go there?
People should be getting invitations now.
Okay. Sorry. I've probably been like taking them back and forth as I close the rooms. I thought there was one I can just send them there.
Oh, you know what? Nope, that did not work. Let me try again.
You may want to close them all the way and start at the beginning, because the auto select feature is the first thing you choose.
Yeah, that's what
Okay.
I'm doing now. Let's see.
You on this, Pat?
Yep. To go through and individually delete. Otherwise, we had to wait 60 seconds. Automatically 5 rooms. All right.
There you go.
So you should have an option to broadcast a message to all if you need to.
I see it. So yeah, so I'll give them their like 2-minute warning.
Yeah. And when you click close all rooms, it gives them a 60-second countdown.
Okay, great, thank you. It's so weird to do this like via Zoom.
Yeah. It's much better than last year, I will say that.
In terms of just how smoothly it runs, it's running.
Yeah, I think we're just more prepared. And last year, I think 3 weeks out is when we decided to go with Zoom as the platform. This year, we made the decision in February to keep it virtual, which I'm so grateful we did.
Yeah, you have to do things a little early to do it well, you know,
Yeah.
and that, you know, we made it like our summer programs all virtual, and what we did, because it's easier, is at the last minute we added in some in-person days, because that's just easier than trying to set up
Yeah.
all the platform stuff like that. You just have to make the decision early.
Yeah. We considered that, we considered setting up like local meetups around this, but then, you know, the whole Delta variant thing,
Yeah.
we just didn't even bother.
The my favorite one in the virtual space was the New York City Museum Educator Roundtable used this thing called Gather Town, which was like, it was like that the little Animal Crossing thing.
Oh yeah, okay.
You had a little avatar and they set up different rooms, and as you walked around you'd encounter other people's avatars and your picture would pop up and you could talk like this with your like Zoomy. But I got so sucked into it that when it was time to leave, I was having trouble leaving because I kept running into people, and then I finally realized, oh, this is an avatar. I don't need to actually walk it to the door. Like I can just click out.
Yeah.
You know, but it
We
was very fun.
considered something along those lines, but then we figured everyone's going to know how to use Zoom by the time October gets here. That's what we went with. The real fun is going to be figuring out how to do a hybrid next year.
All right, I see people working in group 2, but I don't see anybody working anywhere else. Maybe have they all left?
They're in their groups. Let's see.
They're just not answering the questions. Maybe they don't. It's okay. If people are talking, they don't need to keep a record of things.
And they might be doing the thing where they're going to talk and then at the end somebody's going to share something.
And that's okay too. It's not a test.
Be interested to look back and see if the recording is taking what we're doing or if it's somehow recording the breakout rooms.
I think breakout rooms can only be recorded. The main recording doesn't pick them up.
Yeah. In which case, I'll be editing this out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you have to assign someone, at least, you know, there you go, somebody. So group 1 is like on it. Okay, group 2 got some stuff in there. It's gonna be one of those things where I give a 2-minute warning and then it's gonna be like, oh no. Which is fine. We have buffer time, and
Yeah.
ending early is never a bad thing either. I love looking at all the people you've got here, though. It's crazy. They're from everywhere.
Yeah, and that we ended up having this the same time as MCN and AASLH, and that we still have this many people is kind of nice to see.
Well, AASLH was in person, which is, I think, right, which is challenging. Oh, they had some online stuff.
I think they were, but this, from what I've seen, I think right now it's online. I don't know if it's a separate thing. I don't know. All I know is that there are AASLH sessions happening over these 2 days and MCN.
Yes. What's MCN?
Museum Computer Network, I think. I've never been to that one. But I think they do a lot with like technology and the future of museums and things of that nature.
Yeah, The nice thing about the Zoom ones too, I mean, it's harder to get into conference head, right? You get distracted by the other things around you. However, I mean, for this year and the year coming up, they're, the budget belts are tight, and sending folks to, even though you all have always a wonderful, like, kind of light conference fee,
Yeah.
as opposed to something like AM, there's still travel and hotel, and it's challenging for institutions.
I don't know if you heard the announcement yesterday, but we're going to be partnering with the National EMP Network and potentially piloting, depending on how the next year goes, their EMP house thing, where they're going to rent a house for EMPs to stay in, either at a significantly reduced cost or for free, and pair that with free admission to a conference.
That's really great.
Yeah, so just try and remove as many barriers as we can.
Yeah, and I've been appreciating the dialogue around the unpaid internship thing. That we've always paid our interns, very few exceptions, and it's usually if they are in a college program that they have to do a placement, right, as part of their program, and they get credit. Is the only time we'll do an unpaid intern. We even pay our teen interns here. I mean, like the idea that you wouldn't, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's labor concerns around that too, actually.
Yeah, they're doing that work. Oh, should we do the close all rooms thing?
Yeah, we have time. We have time. I was giving them a little extra space.
Okay. That'll give them the 60-second countdown.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing that work. They are looking into, and they're doing the EMP house thing too. And they're also looking into group health insurance, which would also be wonderful.
There's something here, I forget what it was called, the Freelancers Network. It's been here for years. It's performers and nonprofit workers and bookkeepers, weirdly enough, because often that's a job people do. Yeah. And you could buy insurance through it.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah.
The more things like that we have, the better.
This part always makes me feel like Doctor Who, where people are sucked into it, like a wormhole or something, back to the. I need sound effects.
Yeah. I'm just gonna do this so future Pat knows where to put the edit back in.
Future Pat. All right. I think we are all zooming back in. And I am going to go back and share my screen. Thank you for taking some time to sort of put your brains together. And I just want to look through some of the challenges that were listed. Oh, group one, you're on it. Yep, so we see several of you have issues like ours, being sort of inaccessible, whether it's no parking or public transit is really far. Changing perceptions, historic homes being old rich white people and old rich white culture, and not really interesting to other places. So finding relevancy, right? We talk about that a lot. Like, how do you make your history or your content of your place relevant to people, to all kinds of people, to all kinds of audiences? Language barrier, bureaucracy in the museum, and funding of outreach programs, translations. Concerns about crime. I started my career at the Lower East Side Tenement Museum at a time when the Lower East Side was a little bit sketch, and the my colleagues from the Museum of Chinese in the Americas at the time, it was called Museum of Chinese America, and the Eldridge Street Synagogue, the Eldridge Street Project Museum, we put together a flyer that was basically like, come down here, you won't, your car won't get stolen. I mean, that was like, we're all three here, you can see us all three, it's okay. Is anyone willing to share? Because these are great and you all have the links so you can look through them. I'm really curious about this one, the bureaucracy within the museum. Is whoever put that willing to expand on that?
Yeah, that was me at the Carnegie Science Center. So we are part of a larger institution. It's the Carnegie Museums of Pittsburgh. And it can be very difficult sometimes to, have an idea at one institution and then get approval from that, not only from your museum's director, but also from the president's office at the overall institutional, like Carnegie Museums of Pittsburgh level. So that's what I meant by that comment.
Yeah, so it's having the buy-in from the top that this is a central thing that we want to do, which goes back to this idea too of the last session, talking about just DEI in general. It's not just about staffing, it's who are you welcoming into your institution at all levels, right? And how do you do that? The teens one's catching my eye. Yeah, so again, a lot of this seems to be about communicating. And I think that I'm glad to see people have picked up on the trusted partners, because talking about, maybe you don't have parking, but you are close to a bus, or maybe you're not close to public transportation, but you do have parking. Getting some, and what you have that may be meaningful, that may be interesting, getting that out, that you are free, or that you have free nights, getting that out, that can come with your trusted partner to get that word out for you. But then to become relevant, if you really think you're not, that's where that dialogue might be. So it's something we really didn't talk about in our study so much, except this idea of listening and listening what people are interested in. But from outside of this project, like we have a Veterans Advisory Committee, we have an Access Advisory Committee, because as a historic site, we have challenges. Someone mentioned just like literally getting into the spaces. We're a National Historic Landmark. We can't just rip up everything and make it easily accessible. But there's also other elements to access as well, in terms of, we have loops, we put some loops in, and just again, welcoming communities of different sorts, but having folks from those communities to advise us on what they need or what they're interested in. We have a team, we have strong team programs here, and they help us think about what they would want in terms of programming. We have paid internships that was underscored by them really early on, that if they're going to remain in our orbit, they have to be paid, or else they need to go work at the Gap, right? Because they need to contribute to their family income or save for college. So getting feedback or inviting community members in to take a look at your collections, to be, again, regular advisors on perhaps programming or new exhibits, or the strategic plan even, can be a really great way to build your relevancy, if that is a concern to your constituents. At the Tenement Museum, we had, when I was there, for example, worked with the Grand Street Settlement Project, Settlement House, where they gave English language lessons. And we worked with English language learners to, they used our collection, they created exhibits to work on their language skills, but they created exhibits for others to see. One year they created a an immigrant guide because they had come across a historical one that's, told you where to go and how, how to remain safe in New York, that people would get as they got off Ellis Island and got off at Lower Manhattan. And they're like, when I came to JFK, no one gave me anything like this. So they made one. And that has continued on in different format now, but they still do citizenship classes and stuff there and English language learner classes. So this idea of reaching into your community in a way and taking down that barrier of a museum, because they weren't visiting, our neighbors weren't visiting the tenement museum. And to bring them in through this other trusted partner, but to then have them influence what we exhibited. It was really kind of a really great experience. Does anybody on here in our last few minutes, and I don't want to belabor it, but is anybody catching anything in the other groups, in your own group, that you would like to bring up or share, or questions you want to ask of each other or me? Or thing you think you do well and would just like people to know? They're like, no, I want more coffee. How did you decide what to include in the museum boxes? Largely from just, well, what do we have already, right? And what was the original intent? Because the original intent, as I said, was these community room exhibits with information on how to come for free and what we were, which they just didn't want. But the kit idea was like, well, we could send them, posters and information and swag. But then again, with COVID, we had started sending out little STEM kits to partners because we couldn't run programs here. So family programs, or we have an Access Maker Camp for kids with developmental disabilities, including autism. So we were sending them kits that they would work on at home and then beam in and work with an educator. So it kind of became a hybrid of this, okay, we'll send this information about us and kind of fun stuff about us, and then also include, a little glider, a little circuit kit, so the kids can have something to do at home that fits with our mission and who we are and the things we try and teach. So that's how that came about. But some of it was just like, oh, I have like 5,000 rulers that say Intrepid on them. Let's put that in there.
Hi, this is Beth from the Museum of Flight. And I have a question. We used to do, it was called First Free Thursdays. It was like a museum, many museums in our city. I'm in Seattle, and our city participated. COVID has taken that away at the moment. And I was wondering if any museums are trying anything else, or if you did something like that, and just in this time of hopefully getting to the end of COVID and coming back a little bit, if anyone has tried anything else or different that's working for them, because we really miss that, and our communities really miss that also.
Well, did anybody participate in Smithsonian Day? That's been like the first one we did here.
We did, and it was huge. This is Beth again. It was awesome. It was a great day. People kept their masks on, and it was wonderful to have that many people back in the museum.
Yeah, so we did that, but that of course has the pre-registration aspect, so it's a little bit self-sorting. The other days that we had that were, this is an Intrepid, that were more like those open free community days, were arranged in conjunction with the Department of Education here. Because the New York City Department of Education would normally have paid cultural institutions for summer camps where the kids could attend for free, but they weren't running those. So what they did instead, they called them like community days or something like that, where they just enlisted cultural institutions to be open for New York City public school families to come and visit on their own. And we had 4 of those.